What's up guys, today's video is all about the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty's Precon upgrades unleashed. I got 15 cards you should probably be taking out of the deck, 15 cards you should absolutely add, all for under $50. Without further ado, let's upgrade it. Now before we go changing everything, let's do a quick overview of the commander and what direction we want to take the deck. Chishiro the Shattered Blade is 2 a red and a green for a 4/4 legendary Snake Samurai. He reads, whenever an aura or equipment enters the battlefield under your control, create a 2/2 red spirit creature token with menace. That's already pretty cool. Additionally, at the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each modified creature you control. Modified is a new grouping term for all creatures that are either equipped, have an aura attached to them, or have counters of some kind. Now, there's a few ways you can build this commander. He obviously lends himself to more of a Voltron strategy, putting lots of equipment and auras on him, making him go tall and having those spirits be incidental blockers while he swings in for lethal. However, I feel like going wide is going to be way more fun. I think putting a ton of spirit tokens on the battlefield, putting counters on them as fast as possible, and stacking them up to an unstoppable force of spirits is pretty sweet. So let's see what cards are already in the deck that help us with that goal. Forgotten Ancient, Loyal Guardian, and Grumgully are going to be some of the best ways to get counters on your tokens. Now, once you actually get a counter on a token, the commander will level it up from there, but early on, you probably want to be leading with one of these guys. A Key Battle Squad is another really cool card, and it's brand new in the deck. Not only does the art rock, but it gives you an extra combat step whenever you attack with a modified creature, which should be every turn. Champion of Lamholt was a pretty amazing card in the Kylar Humans Precon, but in this deck, it is just insane. You're putting so many tokens on the field. That champion gets so big, so fast, your opponents will have no way to block your army swinging in. Invigorating Hot Springs is another new card in the Kamigawa set, also has amazing art, and is great in that it's a haste enabler for all your tokens and can get the ball rolling on modifying your tokens as well. And the last new card we're going to talk about is Smoke Spirit's Aid. This card not only modifies all your creatures, but if they die, gives you some treasure. All right, so let's see what we're going to add. Our commander is pretty important to the overall strategy, so the first include is a little bit more protection for him. Canopy Cover is a great card in that it's an aura that gives hexproof, but it also gives him pseudo flying, making him that much tougher to block. And speaking of good reasons to keep your commander protected, we're adding in a bit of spot removal, one that is pretty common for commanders, and that is Kenrith's Transformation. This turns any problematic creature into a 3/3 elk that doesn't have any of its fun abilities. You also get to draw a card, which isn't half bad either. So there wasn't quite enough board wipe protection in the deck for my liking, so I ended up adding Heroic Intervention, which helps protect our board once we've gone wide. I also wanted to run just a few more auras that we can get back, and Rancor is probably one of the best ones there is. The recursion every time your creature dies or the enchantment leaves the battlefield that you get it back is super good. Also, having the +2 and trample is just a solid include. Graveyard strategies have become more popular than ever, and having Scavenging Ooze in the deck is not only a great flavor include because he modifies himself and gains you life, but helps you get rid of those pesky graveyard reanimation targets your opponents might have. Renata, Call to the Hunt, is just another great way to make sure all of our token creatures come onto the battlefield with +1/+1 counters. Now, there are a few +1/+1 counter doublers out there. However, we were kind of confined by budget. I mean, doubling season is over $50 by itself, and space limitations, so I ended up just going with Branching Evolution. Hardened Scales would also be a great include and is a little more expensive, so it didn't quite make the budget restraint, but if you have both or all three of those, I would definitely consider including all of them. Alana and Alina are interesting commanders in their own right, however, in this deck, they kick ass. Being able to put the equivalent of their power in +1/+1 counters on any creature and giving that creature haste is pretty nice. But when you realize that trigger happens at the beginning of combat, this next card is going to be even crazier. Breath of Fury is not quite an infinite combo. I thought it was for half a sec until I, read the cards. But it does still give us a lot of combat steps, and assuming we have a wide board of spirits, we can potentially wipe out all of our opponents with just a ton of combat. And even though we already have a haste enabler in the deck, I decided to double up on them and add in Fervor. Just being able to make all your tokens have haste, even without comboing out, is still pretty good. So one of my favorite things to do when a commander is spoiled is see if there's a way to break it. And I think I found a pretty fun one. Rains of the Vine Seed is a recurable enchantment. However, it is unique in that it doesn't come back to your hand once it hits the graveyard. It goes back onto the field attached to a creature of the same type. That means you could run something like an Ashnod's Altar for infinite mana, a Blasting Station, or a Goblin Bombardment for infinite damage. Really just kind of any way you want to run it. And speaking of that sack outlet, I decided to include a Goblin Bombardment. Now, we don't just have this in here for that combo. Being able to sacrifice all your creatures at instant speed in case there is a board wipe is pretty beneficial to get a little bit of damage in when you're going to lose the creatures anyways. But even though we have a lot of ways to make tokens and +1 counters in the deck, I thought it would be fun to just put in one of the best. Avenger of Zendikar is something that should have been included in this deck in the first place, but luckily we had room in the budget to throw it in anyways. I felt like we needed a board wipe upgrade in the deck, so I included Blasphemous Act. This is a classic, and for a good reason. And last but not least, we're adding one new card from Kamigawa, and that is Kodama of the West Tree. This card not only gives all of our modified creatures trample, which is pretty sweet, it also ramps us by an insane amount if we have a wide board. So we've added a ton of awesome cards. What are we taking out? As with most precons, this deck has a backup commander, it actually has two, and several cards that support that backup commander in case you decide to go that direction with the deck. Since we're not going that direction with the deck, these first few cards are going to be pretty obvious outs. First is going to be the mono green backup commander Kosei. I think this card could be a really fun card to build a deck around. However, it is very much a Voltron deck, and that's definitely not the direction we ended up taking. Similarly, Kami the Fractured Calm is the backup Gruul commander in this deck. Goading other opponents' creatures based on an aura we equip to them is not the direction we wanted to go with the deck. It's a cool direction, and I feel like there's a lot of people that want to build specifically around this commander, but since we didn't go that way, it didn't make much sense to do that. Speaking of goading, Agitator and great include in that deck, not a great include in the deck we're going for. And Komenu, even though he's a good boy, is still in that goad direction, so I decided not to include him. We're actually cutting a land here with Mossfire. There was a snafu at the WotC production plant, and this deck ships with two of them, which obviously is not commander legal. So thank you for the new awesome art for this card and for the extra one. I'm definitely going to put it in a different deck. But man, this was probably the easiest cut I ever had to make. Goblin Raise Runners is an interesting card. I don't think it's that good. I just don't think you should play this one. Primeval Protector is cool, but it doesn't have trample. It's really expensive, and I don't think it's what we want to be doing. Speaking of expensive and slow and probably not going to work that great, Ascendant Acolyte is a newer card in this set, but it's just not good. Bone Horde was a weird include in the deck. The deck doesn't have a lot of graveyard synergy. It's focusing more on tokens than actual creatures. Not really sure why it was included. Shifting Shadows is an interesting card, and it is the only card that actually fits well with Bone Horde, but I don't think we want to be sacrificing any of our creatures, especially since we don't really have a good way to bring them back. Spearbreaker Behemoth was an easy swap for Heroic Intervention. I think this is for a more Voltron build. However, your creature that you would be giving Indestructible to should already have multiple layers of protection through the equipment if you're really going Voltron. So I just don't think this is a good card anywhere. Chain Reaction is not a great board wipe, and that's why we included Blasphemous Act. I actually ended up getting rid of Hunter's Insight It's a nice card. However, I feel like there's other enchantments like Snake Umbra that's already in the deck that give us this kind of effect. And last but not least, I cut Walking Skyscrapers. This is a bit of a win more card because it's only going to be free when you already have a overwhelming board state. And at that point, what good is an 8/8 gonna really do? I don't know. I felt like there were better cards we could include that wouldn't be dead draws. And I want to make a quick note about the mana base. Obviously, we didn't do any upgrades to the mana base here. I didn't really feel like it was worth spending the money or the slot on, but depending on your budget, you should definitely look at upgrading the mana base. It's probably the worst one we've gotten in the last few years. I'm not really sure why, but just know you should probably upgrade the mana base if you want the deck to run a little smoother. Now it's time for some stats. Now this is not going to be the biggest swing in upgrades you've ever seen on the channel. The base stats were pretty decent, and I felt like we should focus more on just the tokens and +1s, which obviously do not fit super well into the 4 main categories, which are ramp, card draw, 1/1 removal, and board wipes. Straight out of the box, the deck has 14 pieces of ramp, 12 pieces of card draw, 5 pieces of 1/1 removal, and 4 board wipes. Not too shabby, although a little light on the 1/1, I felt like. After we were done with the upgrades, there was 15 pieces of ramp, 10 pieces of card draw, 8 pieces of 1/1 removal, and 4 board wipes. Now, the reason why we went down 2 on card draw is 1 was attached to that mono green Voltron Commander, which we probably weren't going to get card draw off of very often anyways, and the other one was Shifting Shadow, which was totally randomized getting a creature on the field. Yes, you technically got card advantage from that, but you couldn't really pick and choose, and well, I already explained why we cut it. And for 1/1 removal, we added 3 more pieces. 8 is still a little low. I would have added a Lignify effect or another Kenris Transforming effect if I had the space. However, we were running out of slots. So if you have one already, or if you have the extra budget, I would definitely look at upping the removal package a little bit more. Alright guys, I think that's going to do it. The full deck list is going to be in the video description below. Make sure to comment if you're going to build this deck, or if there's any cards you felt like I should have added and didn't, or cards I took out and shouldn't have. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.